The locket gleamed under the office's soft light. A ghost from a life James Whittaker thought he'd buried. 20 years ago, his wife, Clara, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers of her laughter and a void that swallowed his heart. Now, in his Manhattan penthouse office, that same Lockether locket lay in his trembling hands, plucked from an employee's bag. James, a real estate tycoon pushing 60, had built an empire on grit and grief. But nothing prepared him for this. The locket's intricate engraving, a rose entwined with a heart, was unmistakable. Clara had worn it every day, a gift from her mother, until the night she disappeared. He'd spent years chasing leads, private investigators, police reports, even psychics, until hope became a wound he learned to live with. Yet here it was, clutched in his palm, accusing him of giving up too soon. The employee, Ethan Carter, stood frozen across the desk, his 20-something face pale, hazel eyes wide with panic. He was a junior assistant, hired 6 months ago, unremarkable except for his quiet efficiency. James had caught him slipping files into his backpack after hours, a petty theft he'd planned to confront with a warning. But when he demanded to see inside the bag, he found more than stolen documents. The locket, nestled in a worn velvet pouch, had stopped him cold. "Why do you have this?" James's voice was low, dangerous, each word a shard of glass. Ethan's mouth opened, but no sound came. His hands twitched, the backpack still dangling from one shoulder. The room felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken truths. James's mind raced back to Clara, her warm brown eyes, her laugh that could light up a room, her sudden absence that left him a husk. They'd been married 5 years, young and in love, building dreams in a modest Brooklyn apartment before his empire took root. She'd vanished after a charity gala, her car found abandoned on a quiet road. No signs of struggle, no ransom note. The police called it a runaway case. James called it betrayal, then regret, then despair. Ethan finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't steal it, Mr. Whittaker. I swear." "Then explain this." James slammed the locket on the desk, the clatter echoing like a gunshot. Ethan flinched, his gaze darting to the door as if calculating an escape. But James wasn't letting him gon it until he had answers. "I found it," Ethan said, his words rushed. "At a pawn shop, months ago. I didn't know it was hers. I just liked it." "A pawn shop?" James's laugh was bitter, hollow. "You expect me to believe that?" "It's the truth." Ethan's voice cracked, desperation creeping in. "I can show you the receipt. It was in Brooklyn, some hole-in-the-wall place. I thought it was just vintage." James's grip tightened on the locket, its edges biting into his palm. A pawn shop in Brooklyn, of all places. The coincidence felt like a cruel joke, but Ethan's fear seemed genuine. The kid was either a brilliant liar or caught in something bigger than himself. "Sit down," James ordered, pointing to a chair. Ethan hesitated, then obeyed, his backpack slumping to the floor. James paced, the locket burning a hole in his hand. He needed to know more: where it came from, how it ended up in a pawn shop, why Ethan had it. But another question gnawed at him. Was Clara still out there, somewhere? Or was this locket the last piece of her he'd ever hold? The office door creaked open, and Sarah, James's executive assistant, stepped in. She was 25, sharp-eyed, with a quiet strength that had earned her James's trust over 2 years. Her dark hair was pulled back, her expression unreadable as she glanced between James and Ethan. "Everything okay, Mr. Whitaker?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. James didn't answer right away. Sarah had been the one to tip him off about Ethan's late-night habits, noticing files missing from her desk. She'd urged him to check the security footage, which led to this confrontation. Now, her presence felt like another piece of a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Sarah, stay," James said, his tone clipped. "We're not done here." Sarah nodded, closing the door behind her. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flicking to Sarah, then back to James. The tension in the room was a living thing, coiling tighter with every second. James held up the locket, its chain dangling like a lifeline. "This belonged to my wife," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "She's been gone 20 years. So, Ethan, you're gonna tell me everything, every detailer, I swear. I'll ruin you." Ethan swallowed hard, his hands gripping the arms of the chair. "I'm not lying, Mr. Whitaker. I bought it because it reminded me of someone." "Who?" James snapped. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes dropping to the floor. "Someone I lost." James stared at him, the words hitting like a punch. He'd expected a flimsy excuse, not a confession that mirrored his own pain. Sarah stepped closer, her gaze softening as she looked at Ethan. "Ethan," she said quietly, "if you know something, you need to say it. Now." The room fell silent, the weight of secrets pressing down. James's heart pounded, a mix of hope and dread. The locket was a key. But to what? A truth about Clara, or a truth about the young man trembling before him? As the city lights glittered outside, James knew this was only the beginning. The locket wasn't just a keepsake, it was a thread to a past he'd never stopped chasing. And maybe, just maybe, a clue to the love he'd lost. Ethan's words hung in the air, fragile and heavy, like a confession on the edge of breaking. James leaned forward, the locket still clutched in his hand, its weight anchoring him to a moment he couldn't escape. "Someone you lost," he repeated, his voice low, testing the truth in Ethan's eyes. Ethan nodded, his gaze still fixed on the floor. "My brother," he said softly. He died 2 years ago. That locket looked like one he used to wear. I bought it because it felt like a piece of him." James's chest tightened. The kid's voice carried a rawness that was hard to fake. But trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not now. Not with Clara's locket staring him in the face. He glanced at Sarah, who stood near the door, her arms crossed, her expression a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "Show me the receipt," James demanded, his tone sharp. Ethan fumbled in his backpack, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. He slid it across the desk, his hands shaking. James snatched it up, scanning the faded ink. Brooklyn Pawn and Trade, 1274 Fulton Street. Vintage locket, $45. April 2025. The date was recent, the address painfully close to where he and Clara had lived decades ago. This doesn't prove anything, James said, tossing the receipt back. You could have bought it to cover your tracks. Mr. Whitaker, I'm not a thief, Ethan said, his voice rising. I didn't know it was your wife's. I swear. I just saw it in the shop and what? James cut him off. You thought you'd keep it. Sell it. What were you doing with my files? Ethan. Ethan's face flushed, his eyes darting to Sarah again. She stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. Ethan, you were taking documents. I saw you. If this isn't about the locket, then what is it? Ethan's shoulders slumped, defeat creeping into his posture. I was looking for something, he admitted. Not to steal. I swear. I needed information. Information. James's eyes narrowed. What kind? Ethan hesitated, his fingers twisting together. It's personal. I can't explain it yet. But it's not about you or your wife. I didn't know about the locket's history. I just needed answers. James's patience snapped. He slammed his hand on the desk, the locket rattling against the wood. You don't get to be vague, kid. You're caught with my wife's keepsake and my company's files. Start talking, or I call the police. Sarah touched James's arm lightly, a silent plea for calm. Let him explain. Mr. Whitaker. If he's telling the truth, we need to hear it. James exhaled sharply, his anger warring with the flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, Ethan's story could lead to Clara. He nodded, giving Ethan the floor. Ethan took a shaky breath. My brother, Lucas, was different. He was gay. And our family, our parents, they didn't accept him. They kicked him out when he was 17. I was just a kid then, but I never stopped looking for him. 2 years ago, I found out he died in a shelter. Overdose. His voice broke, and he looked away, blinking rapidly. The locket looked like one he wore, one our grandma gave him. I thought maybe it was his. Or at least, something to remember him by. James's grip on the locket loosened slightly, his anger faltering. Ethan's pain was real, a mirror to his own. But the coincidence still gnawed at him. And the files. He pressed. Ethan hesitated again, his eyes flickering with something like fear. I was looking for records. Lucas worked odd jobs, sometimes for big companies like yours. I thought, maybe there was a trace of him here, in your old employee records. I just wanted to know more about his life. Sarah frowned, stepping closer. Why didn't you just ask? Why sneak around? Because I didn't think anyone would care. Ethan's voice rose, raw and desperate. He was just another nobody to people like you. I didn't want to be told no. The room fell silent, the weight of Ethan's words settling like dust. James stared at the locket, his mind spinning. Clara's disappearance. Ethan's brother. The pawn show pit was too much to be random. He didn't believe in fate. But this felt like something more. Sarah. James said quietly. Pull the employee records from 20 years ago. Every temp. Every contractor. I want names. Sarah nodded, moving to her laptop in the corner. Ethan watched her, his expression a mix of hope and dread. James sat back, the locket still in his hand, its rose and heart design glinting like a beacon. He didn't know if Ethan was telling the truth. But he knew one thing, this locket was a thread. And he'd pull it until it unraveled everything. As Sarah typed, James's thoughts drifted to Clara. She'd loved Brooklyn. Its grit and charm. Its hidden stories. Could she have crossed paths with Ethan's brother? Could Lucas have known something about her disappearance? The questions burned. But for the first time in years, James felt alive with purpose. Found something, Sarah said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension. She turned her laptop to face them. A scanned document glowing on the screen. Lucas Carter, temp worker, 2003. Worked maintenance for one of your Brooklyn properties. Ethan's breath hitched, his eyes locking on the screen. James leaned forward, his heart pounding. The locket felt heavier now. A key to a door he wasn't sure he wanted to open. James stared at the screen, the name Lucas Carter burning into his vision. A temp worker, barely a blip in the vast machine of his company, yet tied to Ethan and, somehow, to Clara's locket. The coincidence was a knife, twisting deeper with every revelation. Lucas worked for you. Ethan's voice was a mix of shock and hope, his eyes wide as he leaned toward the screen. What else does it say? Sarah scrolled through the file, her brow furrowed. Not much. Hired for 3 months in 2003. Maintenance at the Fulton Street property. No performance notes. No termination record. Just dropped off. James's mind churned. Fulton Street blocks from where Clara's car was found abandoned. The locket. The pawn shop. Now this. He didn't believe in cosmic signs. But the connections were piling up. Each one a breadcrumb leading somewhere dark. Did Lucas ever mention a woman named Clara? James asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Did he ever talk about a locket? Or anything strange from that job? Ethan shook his head, his expression pained. I was 12 when he got kicked out. We barely talked after that. He sent me a few letters, but they were short, mostly about how he was surviving. Nothing about a locket or a woman. James's jaw tightened. He wanted to shake Ethan, to demand more, but the kid's grief was a mirror to his own. Instead, he turned to Sarah. Cross-referenced Lucas's employment dates with Clara's disappearance. August 2003. Anything overlap? Sarah nodded, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the city outside and the faint clack of keys. Ethan shifted in his chair, his hands clasped tightly, as if bracing for impact. Got it, Sarah said, her voice tense. Lucas was on payroll from June to August 2003. Clara went missing August 12th. He was at the Fulton Street site the week before. James's heart skipped. A week. A single week separated Lucas's time at his property from Clara's vanishing. He held the locket tighter, its edges pressing into his skin. What did he do there? Maintenance covers a lot. Basic stuff, Sarah said, scanning the file. Cleaning. Minor repairs. Inventory checks for the building's storage units. It was a mixed-use property offices. Some residential units. Storage units. James repeated, a chill creeping up his spine. Clara had loved collecting odd trinkets, storing them in a rented unit at one of his properties. He'd forgotten about it until now. The memory buried under years of grief. Could Lucas have found something there? Taken something? Ethan's voice broke the silence. Mr. Whitaker, I know this looks bad, but I didn't know about any of this. I was just trying to find Lucas's story. I thought, maybe your company had records of where he went after he left. James studied Ethan, searching for a lie in his earnest eyes. The kid was either innocent or a master manipulator, and James's gut couldn't decide which. You're not off the hook, he said finally. But if you're telling the truth, you're going to help me figure this out. Ethan nodded quickly, relief flickering across his face. Anything. I just want to know what happened to Lucas. Sarah closed her laptop, her expression unreadable. Mr. Whitaker, the storage unit records from 2003 might still be in the archives. I can dig deeper, but it'll take time. Those files are in the old warehouse in Brooklyn. Do it, James said. And Ethan, you're coming with me. Ethan blinked, startled. To the warehouse? Yes. If your brother's tied to this, you're part of it now. James stood, slipping the locket into his pocket. Its weight felt like a promise, a tether to Clara he couldn't let go. Sarah hesitated, then spoke. Mr. Whitaker, maybe we should call the police. If this is connected to Clara's disappearance. No police, James said sharply. Not yet. I need to know what I'm dealing with first. Sarah nodded, though her eyes lingered on Ethan, a flicker of doubt in her gaze. James noticed but said nothing. Sarah was loyal, but she was also protective, and he couldn't tell if her suspicion was aimed at Ethan or the situation itself. The drive to the Brooklyn warehouse was quiet, the city's lights blurring past like memories. James gripped the steering wheel, the locket in his pocket a constant reminder of what was at stake. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, his hands fidgeting. Sarah followed in her own car, insisting on coming along to help with the files. The warehouse loomed ahead, a squat, gray building tucked between gentrified lofts and old factories. Inside, it smelled of dust and time, shelves towering with boxes of forgotten records. Sarah led the way to the 2003 section, her flashlight cutting through the dimness. Here, she said, pulling a box labeled Fulton Street property. 2003. James and Ethan crowded around as she opened it, revealing stacks of yellowed papers. Invoices, work orders, tenant logs, and a single photo, slipped between pages. James's breath caught. It was Clara, smiling in front of the Fulton Street building, her locket gleaming at her throat. The date stamped on the corner, August 10th, 2003, 2 days before she vanished. Ethan stared at the photo, his face paling. That's her. Your wife. James nodded, his throat tight. That's Clara. Sarah's voice was soft but urgent. Mr. Whitaker, look at the background. James squinted, his heart lurching. Behind Clara, barely visible in the shadows, was a young man in a maintenance uniform, his face half-turned. Ethan gasped, his voice barely a whisper. That's Lucas. The photo trembled in James's hand, Clara's smile frozen in time, Lucas's shadowed figure a ghost in the background. The warehouse's stale air seemed to thicken, pressing against his chest as he stared at the image. 2 days before Clara disappeared, Lucas had been there close enough to be caught in her orbit. Ethan's voice shook. That's really him. Lucas. He reached for the photo, but James pulled it back. His eyes locked on the young man in the maintenance uniform. The resemblance to Ethan was uncanny, the same sharp jaw, the same haunted eyes. How is this possible? James muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Your brother was there, with my wife, days before she vanished. Ethan shook his head, his voice desperate. I don't know. Lucas never mentioned her. He didn't talk about his jobs. Not to me. I was just a kid. Sarah knelt beside the box, sifting through papers with methodical precision. There's more here, she said, pulling out a work order. Lucas was assigned to clear out Storage Unit 17B the week of August 10th. It's listed as belonging to Clara Whitaker. James's heart stopped. Clara's storage unit. The one she'd filled with trinkets, old books, and keepsakes from her travels. He'd paid the rent on it for years after she disappeared, unable to let go, until the property was sold and the unit cleared out. He'd assumed her things were lost forever. Lucas had access to her things, James said, his voice hollow. He could have taken the locket. Ethan's face crumpled. Lucas wasn't a thief. He wouldn't. Then explain this. James held up the photo, his voice rising. Your brother was there, Ethan. Right there with her. And now I find her locket in your bag. Ethan flinched, his eyes glistening. I told you. I bought it at the pawn shop. I didn't know it was hers. Lucas, he wouldn't hurt anyone. Sarah stood, her voice calm but firm. We need to keep looking. There might be more in these files, something that explains this. James nodded, though his mind was spiraling. The locket, Lucas, Clarate was all connected. But the how and why eluded him. He handed the photo to Sarah, who tucked it into her pocket, and they dove back into the box. Pages flew, each one a potential clue: tenant complaints, maintenance logs, inventory lists. Nothing mentioned Clara or Lucas directly, but the weight of their proximity in that photo was undeniable. Hours passed, the warehouse growing colder as night deepened. Ethan sat on the floor, flipping through a ledger, his face drawn with exhaustion. James watched him, torn between suspicion and pity. The kid's story about his brother tugged at him, but the locket was a tether to Clara, and he couldn't let emotion cloud his judgment. Sarah's voice broke the silence. Found something. She held up a yellowed envelope, unmarked but sealed. It was tucked inside a lease agreement for Unit 17B. James took it, his fingers trembling as he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in Clara's unmistakable script. His breath caught as he read. James, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I had to leave. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I needed to protect someone. I can't explain yet, but know I'm safe. The locket will find you when it's time. Clara. The words blurred as James's eyes stung. She'd left willingly. Not taken. Not lost. But gone by choice. The betrayal cut deeper than her absence ever had. Yet the mention of protecting someone sparked a new question. Who? And why? Ethan looked up, sensing the shift in James's demeanor. What is it? James handed him the letter, his voice hoarse. She left me. On purpose. Ethan read it, his expression softening. She said she was protecting someone. Maybe Lucas knew who. James's mind raced. Clara's note was cryptic, but it hinted at a secret bigger than her disappearance. And Lucas, a troubled kid working a dead-end job, was somehow part of it. Sarah touched James's shoulder, her voice gentle. We need to trace the locket's path. The pawn shop receipt, Ethan. You said it was on Fulton Street. We should go there. See if they have records. James nodded, the plan grounding him. Tomorrow. First thing. The pawn shop was a cramped, cluttered space, the shelves lined with relics of other people's lives. The owner, a grizzled man in his 60s named Sal, squinted at the receipt Ethan handed over. Yeah, I remember this locket, he said, scratching his beard. Pretty piece. Came in last year. From a guy who said he found it in a storage unit he bought at auction. An auction? James asked, his pulse quickening. Which one? Sal shrugged. Some warehouse clear out in Brooklyn. I don't keep names, but I got a log. He rummaged behind the counter, pulling out a battered notebook. Here. Lot 42. August 2024. Buyer was anonymous. Paid cash. James's hope flickered. Another dead end. But the storage unit angle kept circling back. Clara's unit. Lucas's access. The locket's reappearance site was all tied to that damn property. Ethan spoke up, his voice tentative. Did the guy say anything else? Like where he was from, or why he was selling it? Sal eyed Ethan, then James. Said it belonged to someone he cared about. But he needed the money. Looked rough, like he'd been through hell. That's all I got. James's mind flashed to Lucas Young. Struggling. Maybe desperate enough to sell a stolen locket. Or maybe he hadn't stolen it. Maybe Clara had given it to him. For reasons locked in that cryptic note. As they left the pawn shop, the locket heavy in James's pocket, he felt Clara's presence closer than ever. But with it came a growing dread. The truth might not set him free. It might break him. The Brooklyn streets buzzed with morning traffic. But James felt detached. The locket in his pocket a burning weight. Clara's note replayed in his mind. I needed to protect someone. Who? And how was Lucas? A kid barely scraping by. Tangled in her secret. The pawn shop had offered clues but no answers. And James's hope was fraying at the edges. Ethan walked beside him, his face pale, eyes red from a sleepless night. Sarah followed, her silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. They'd agreed to return to the Fulton Street property, now a sleek office complex, to search for any trace of Clara's storage unit or Lucas's work there. The building loomed ahead, its glass facade a stark contrast to the gritty warehouse of their past. Inside, the property manager, a brisk woman named Linda, led them to the basement, where old storage units still stood. Most of these were cleared out years ago, she said, unlocking a rusted gate. But 17B is still here. Nobody's rented it since 2003. James's pulse quickened as they approached the unit. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dusty space filled with boxes, some labeled in Clara's neat handwriting. Ethan hesitated at the threshold, his expression torn. "This feels personal," he said softly. "It is," James replied, stepping inside. He opened a box, finding old journals, photos, and trinkets. Clara's life, preserved like a shrine. A wave of grief hit him, but he pushed it down, focusing on the task. Sarah sifted through another box, pulling out a small notebook. "This has Lucas's name on it," she said, her voice sharp with surprise. She handed it to James, who flipped it open. Inside were maintenance notes, repairs, inventory checks, but one page stood out. Written in a hurried scrawl, "Met C. in 17B. She's scared. Said she's leaving. Gave me her locket to keep safe." James's heart pounded. "C. Clara." He looked at Ethan, whose face had gone ashen. "Your brother knew her. He wasn't just there, he talked to her." Ethan took the notebook, his hands trembling as he read. "Lucas never told me. Why wouldn't he tell me?" "Maybe he couldn't," Sarah said, her voice gentle. "If Clara was protecting someone, maybe Lucas was too." James's mind raced. Clara, scared, giving her locket to a stranger, a kid for safekeeping. It didn't add up, but it was the closest he'd come to answers in 20 years. He turned back to the boxes, searching for anything else. A photo slipped from a journal, showing Clara with a young woman, both smiling, arms around each other. The woman looked familiar, her features soft but striking. "Who's this?" James asked, showing the photo to Ethan and Sarah. Ethan shook his head, but Sarah's eyes widened. I think that's Anna," she said. "Anna Torres. She was a tenant here in 2003. I saw her name in the lease records last night." "Anna," James repeated, the name sparking a vague memory. Clara had mentioned an Anna once, a friend she'd met at a charity event. Could she be the one Clara was protecting? "We need to find her," James said, his voice firm. "If she knew Clara, she might know why she left." Sarah nodded, pulling out her phone. "I'll check the tenant records again. See if there's contact info." Ethan clutched the notebook, his voice barely audible. Lucas was involved in something big, wasn't he? Something dangerous. James didn't answer, but the thought chilled him. Clara's note, Lucas's involvement, Anna's connection, it was a web, and he was caught in it. They left the storage unit, the photo and notebook tucked safely in James's bag. Back at the office, Sarah tracked down Anna Torres's last known address, a small apartment in Queens. The drive there was tense, Ethan fidgeting in the back seat, James's hands tight on the wheel. When they knocked, a woman in her late 40s answered, her dark eyes wary. She matched the photo, older but unmistakable. "I'm James Whitaker," he said, holding up the photo. "This is my wife, Clara. You knew her?" Anna's face paled, her hand gripping the doorframe. "Clara," she whispered. What do you want?" "The truth," James said, his voice raw. "She left me 20 years ago. Said she was protecting someone. Was it you?" Anna's eyes filled with tears, and she stepped back. gesturing them inside. The apartment was modest, filled with books and framed photos, one of which showed Clara and Anna together, laughing. "Yes," Anna said finally, her voice breaking. "It was me. Clara saved my life." James's breath caught. "How?" Anna sat, her hands twisting together. "I was in love with her, and she loved me back. But in 2003, my family, they were dangerous. If they found out, they'd have killed us both. Clara left to protect me, to make it look like she'd just disappeared." James staggered back, the words hitting like a tidal wave. Clara, in love with someone else. Not just any woman. A secret she'd kept from him. The locket. Lucas. The note. It all clicked. And yet it shattered everything he thought he knew. James's world tilted, Anna's words echoing like a distant explosion. Clara had loved her enough to vanish, to leave him with nothing but questions and a locket that burned in his pocket. He sank into a chair, the photo of Clara and Anna trembling in his hand. "You're saying Clara left me, for you?" His voice was hoarse, barely holding together. Anna nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Not just for me. To protect me. My family, father. My brothers, they were old school. Violent. If they'd found out about us, they'd have hunted us down. Clara thought disappearing was the only way to keep us both safe." Ethan stood frozen by the door, his eyes wide, the notebook still clutched to his chest. Sarah sat beside James, her hand hovering near his shoulder, offering silent support. The room felt too small, the air too thick with revelations. "Why didn't she tell me?" James asked, his voice breaking. "I loved her. I would have helped." Anna's gaze softened, filled with regret. "She wanted to, but she was afraid you'd try to fix it. And that would have put you in danger too. She left that note, hoping one day you'd understand." James's fingers traced the locket in his pocket. Clara's words from the note replaying. "The locket will find you when it's time." Had she meant for it to lead him here? To Anna? To this truth that tore his heart in two? What about Lucas? Ethan's voice cut through, sharp with urgency. "My brother. He met Clara. Had her locket. What did he know?" Anna's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "Lucas. He was the maintenance kid. Right? I remember him. He caught us once. In the storage unit." Clara was crying, saying she had to leave. She gave him the locket, asked him to keep it safe. She trusted him. Trusted him. James's voice rose, anger flaring. She trusted a stranger, but not her own husband. She was desperate. Anna said softly. "Lucas was kind. He didn't judge us. He promised to hold onto the locket until she came back for it. But she never did." Ethan's voice trembled. "What happened to Lucas? Did he say anything about Clara after that?" Anna shook her head. "I only saw him once more. A few weeks later. He looked scared. Said he was leaving town. I didn't know why. Then I heard he'd died. Years later. I'm so sorry. Ethan." Ethan's face crumpled, and he turned away, his shoulders shaking. James watched him, torn between his own pain and the kids. Lucas had been a bridge between Clara and Anna, a keeper of their secret. And it had cost him something, maybe everything. Sarah spoke up, her voice steady. Anna, where did Clara go? After she left. Anna's eyes dropped to her hands. I don't know. She wouldn't tell me. Said it was safer that way. We wrote letters for a while. Through a P.O. box. Then they stopped. About a year later. I thought she'd moved on. Or, her voice trailed off. Heavy with unspoken fears. James's mind reeled. Clara. Alive. Somewhere. Living a life he couldn't imagine. Or dead. Her trail gone cold. The locket was his only link. And it had led him to Anna, but was this the end? Or just another layer of the mystery? I need to find her, James said. His voice firm despite the ache in his chest. If she's out there, I need to know. Anna nodded, wiping her tears. I'll give you the P.O. box address. It's old, but it's all I have. She scribbled it down, handing the paper to James. Be careful. If her trail stopped, there's a reason. Back in the car, James clutched the paper. The P.O. box address, a faint hope. Ethan sat in the back seat, silent, his eyes distant. Sarah drove, her gaze flicking to James with concern. You okay? She asked quietly. No, James admitted, his voice raw. But I can't stop now. The P.O. box was in a small post office in upstate New York. A 4-hour drive. They arrived at dusk. The building nearly empty. The clerk, an older woman with kind eyes, checked the box's records. Closed in 2005. She said. Last renter was a Clara Thompson. James's heart lurched. Clara's maiden name. Any forwarding address? The clerk shook her head. Nothing. But there's an unclaimed package still here. Addressed to that box. Never picked up. James's pulse raced as she retrieved Ida's small, battered envelope. Postmarked September 2004. Inside was a single letter. In Clara's handwriting. Anna. I'm safe. But I can't come back. The locket will find James. Tell him I loved him. Always. See. James's knees buckled, and Sarah caught his arm, steadying him. Clara had known the locket would reach him, had planned for it. But why hadn't she reached out herself? What was she running from? Ethan's voice broke the silence. She mentioned Lucas in the notebook. Maybe he knew where she went. James nodded, the letter trembling in his hand. We need to find out what happened to Lucas after he left Brooklyn. If he knew Clara's plan, he might have left a trail. As they drove back to the city, the locket felt heavier. Its rose and heart design a symbol of love and loss. James didn't know if he was chasing Clara or her ghost, but he'd follow the trail to its end, no matter what it cost. The city lights blurred past as James drove. The letter from Clara burning a hole in his mind. Tell him I loved him. Always. The words were a lifeline and a wound. Proof of her love, but also her choice to leave. Ethan sat beside him, clutching Lucas's notebook, while Sarah scrolled through her phone in the back seat, searching for any trace of Lucas's life after 2003. We need to know where Lucas went, James said, his voice steady despite the chaos inside. If he knew Clara's plan, he might have left something behind, a letter, contact, anything. Ethan nodded, his voice low. He was scared when he left Brooklyn. Anna said so. Maybe he was running from the same thing Clara was. Sarah looked up, her expression grim. I found something. A shelter in Albany reported a Lucas Carter staying there in late 2003. No details. Just a name and a date. It's a start. James's grip tightened on the wheel. Albany. Not far from the P.O. box. Another thread. Fragile but real. We'll go tomorrow, he said. If Lucas was there, someone might remember him. The shelter was a low brick building, its paint peeling under the weight of years. Inside, it smelled of bleach and desperation, the kind of place that housed stories no one wanted to hear. The director, a tired woman named Maria, checked her records after James explained their search, carefully omitting Clara's name. Lucas Carter, Maria said, flipping through a binder. Yeah, he was here. November 2003. Stayed a few weeks. Kept to himself. But he left something behind. She pulled out a small envelope, sealed, with Ethan written on it in a shaky hand. Ethan's breath hitched as he took it, his fingers trembling. He left this for me. Maria nodded, said if anyone came looking, to give it to an Ethan Carter. Guess that's you. Ethan tore it open, his eyes scanning the single page. His face crumpled as he read aloud, Ethan, I'm sorry I left you. I got mixed up in something big. Something I couldn't stop. The locket's safe, but I can't keep it anymore. Find Clara if you catch the key. Love. Lucas. James's heart pounded. Find Clara. He repeated. He knew where she was. Ethan's voice broke. He was trying to protect her, wasn't he? Just like she was protecting Anna. Sarah touched Ethan's shoulder, her voice soft. Maybe. But we need to know what he was running from. If it was Anna's family. Or something else. Maria spoke up. Lucas mentioned a guy once. Someone who scared him. Said he was being watched. That he had to keep moving. Never gave a name. James's mind raced. Anna's family, her father. Her brothers, had Clara and Lucas been running from them? Or was there another threat? One Clara hadn't named in her letters. He turned to Ethan. Did Lucas ever mention anyone dangerous? Anyone who might have been after him? Ethan shook his head. Tears in his eyes. He didn't tell me anything. Just those letters when I was a kid. Saying he was okay. I thought he was just lost. Sarah's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it, her face paling. Mr. Whitaker. I cross-checked Anna's family. Her older brother, Marco Torres, has a record assault, extortion, linked to organized crime in the early 2000s. He's still alive. Lives in Jersey. James's blood ran cold. Organized crime. If Marco had found out about Clara and Anna, he might have gone after them both, and Lucas, the kid who knew too much. We need to talk to him, James said, his voice hard. If he's the reason Clara ran, he's got answers. The drive to Jersey was tense. The weight of Lucas's letter and Clara's locket pressing down on them. Marco Torres lived in a modest house. A far cry from the criminal life Sarah's research suggested. When he opened the door, he was a hulking man in his 50s. His face weathered but sharp. What do you want? Marco asked. his eyes narrowing as he sized up James, Ethan, and Sarah. James held up the locket, his voice steady. "This belonged to my wife, Clara. She was involved with your sister, Anna. I think you know why she disappeared." Marco's face darkened, but he stepped aside, letting them in. The living room was sparse. A single photo of Anna and their family on the mantel. "I haven't seen Anna in years," he said gruffly. "And I don't know any Clara." "You're lying," James said, his voice low. "Clara ran because of you. Because of what you'd do if you found out about her and Anna." Marco's jaw tightened, but his eyes flickered with something guilt. "Maybe. I didn't touch your wife," he said. "But yeah, I knew about Anna. I was angry back then. Stupid. I said things I shouldn't have. Anna left, and I let her go. If your wife was with her, I didn't know." "What about Lucas Carter?" Ethan asked, stepping forward. "He worked for you, didn't he? Did you threaten him?" Marco's gaze sharpened. "The maintenance kid. He was nosy, always poking around. I told him to back off, but I didn't hurt him. He left on his own." James didn't believe him, but Marco's story was too vague to crack. As they left, the locket felt heavier, Clara's absence sharper. She'd run from Marco, from danger, but where had she gone? And why had Lucas followed? James sat in his office, the locket on his desk, its rose and heart design catching the light. A week had passed since confronting Marco, and the trail felt colder, the answers slipping through his fingers. Clara had loved Anna, had run to protect her, and Lucas had carried her secret until it broke him. But where was Clara now? Ethan hovered near the door, his face drawn. He'd barely spoken since reading Lucas's letter, the weight of his brother's death heavier now that he knew Lucas had been protecting Clara. Sarah sat at her desk, typing furiously, chasing down the last leads from the shelter and the P.O. box. "I found something," Sarah said suddenly, turning her laptop. A marriage record from 2006. Upstate New York. Clara Thompson and a woman named Emily Harper. No photo, but the dates line up. James's heart stopped. Clara. Married. Alive. The thought was a knife, twisting between love and betrayal. "Where are they now?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Sarah hesitated. "Last known address is a house in Vermont, but it's from 2010. After that, nothing." "We're going," James said, standing. Ethan nodded, grabbing his coat, and Sarah followed, her loyalty unwavering. The drive to Vermont was quiet, each mile heavy with anticipation. The house was a small cabin, nestled in the woods, its windows dark. No one answered their knock, but a neighbor, an older man chopping wood, approached. "You looking for Clara and Emily?" he asked, wiping his brow. "They moved years ago. Nice couple. Kept to themselves. Clara said they were starting over somewhere new." James's chest ached. Did she leave anything behind? A forwarding address? The man shook his head. Just a message, carved on a tree out back. Said it was for someone named James. They followed him to a towering oak, where Clara's handwriting was etched into the bark. James. I loved you. I'm sorry. Be free. Tears stung James's eyes as he traced the words. Clara had loved him, had always loved him, but she'd chosen a life he couldn't be part of. The locket, her letters, Lucas's sacrifice was all her way of saying goodbye, of setting him free from the grief that had defined him. Ethan touched the tree, his voice soft. Lucas helped her. He kept her secret, even when it cost him everything. James nodded, the locket heavy in his hand. He was a good brother. Sarah's hand found James's. A quiet anchor. What now, Mr. Whitaker? He looked at the tree, Clara's words, and felt the weight lift. Just a fraction. We go home, he said. And we let her go. Back in Manhattan, James placed the locket in a small box, alongside Clara's photo and her letters. He'd never know her full story, but he knew her heart. Ethan stood beside him, holding Lucas's notebook, a faint smile breaking through his grief. Thank you, Ethan said, for helping me find him. James clasped his shoulder. Thank you for helping me find her. As Ethan left, Sarah lingered, her eyes warm. You did right by her, Mr. Whitaker. By both of them. James nodded, the city's hum filling the silence. Clara was gone, but her love lingered in the locket, in the truth, in the lives she'd touched. And for the first time in 20 years, James felt free to live again, carrying her memory not as a wound, but as a gift.